So we've been talking about expected values and said that these methods will underpin many of our decision-making situations. And the expected value of X is the long-run average result. And I emphasised yesterday that you need to be careful about how long the run is that you do your average out over. It doesn't have to be long in time. It could be a broad range of different options that you look at the various values of. So the expected value formula was a simple average formula where PI is the probability of event XI happening, and XI is the value of, PI is the probability of event I happening, and XI is the value of that. And so the average is the sum of PI XI. And we looked at the six-sided dice, and then we looked at the roulette table. And now what I want to go on to is sort of, that's the outcome of it, to a sort of business example. The business example I'm going to use was given by somebody else, but so it's a little artificial. No, it's very artificial, but it's got a lot of it has a lot of real relationship to real problems which really happen. I'll try and introduce some of those for my own problems as I go along. So the first example is a salesperson who's paid commission on sales, and not every sale gets the same amount of commission, and so this salesperson looks at the looking back at their own experience, the probability that they will make $80 profit on a deal is about 0.3. The probability that they will make $90 is 0.5, and $100 is 0.2. So if this person's planning their life and they want to work out how much money they're going to have, how many per activity that they do, per sales that they do, then they could work out their expected outcome. And from the formula we looked at, the mean outcome, it's fairly easy to work that one out. Sorry. Anyone want to tell me what the answer is? It's what you need is 24 plus 45 plus 20, and that is 90, roughly, yeah? Which is nice because it's the thing with the average probability as well. So, however, decisions can be made under greater uncertainty than that. We're using here an example of a company supplying paint to the car industry. Now, in a lot of factors of the car industry, the industry itself is trying to do things at just-in-time output, right? Do you know what just-in-time means? It means I don't have to have a car in stock that I'm not going to sell tomorrow, right? That's just-in-time. If you could do that, the advantage would be you wouldn't need a huge, great garage. You could just have a small garage, just to have enough cars that I will sell today and have enough cars in tomorrow. Now, there are bound to be problems there, because what happens if there's a strike at at some port and things can't come in, or there are other risks if I do that. So generally speaking, if you go to your average car showroom, you will find that they have cars ready to sell, more cars than they expect to sell in any one day. And if you've bought a car in the last 6 months to a year, they're quite keen with their deals at the moment to sell you them, especially if you've got an old banger to trade in. For some reason seem to be happy to give you money for it, which is interesting. But in order to do this just-in-time thing, the company itself then adds stress to their suppliers. So if you go back down the supply chain, the people who make the cars put the stress on the people who make the seats. And the people who make the seats put the stress on the people who sew the covers. Yeah? And so somebody somewhere ends up with carrying the cost of this just-in-time process. It's not as easy to do. But if you're the guy or woman or company, should I say, I really should say company, supplying paint to the car industry, to a particular manufacturer, you have a number of different manufacturers you're working with. Each will have different supply needs for a given day. So you've got to guess how much paint they're going to need. Now, the problem is, if you have too much paint in, you're storing it, and that costs you money. If you don't have enough paint in, then they go somewhere else for their paint. You're not the only supplier of paint that they can get. So that you've got difficulties to decide in what to do. So what the company needs to do is look at what's the probability that a certain colour of paint will be sold. Yeah? So if you go outside, if you wanted to buy a Fiat 500, mostly you'll want it in peppermint blue or peppermint green, depending on which way you like to look at it. And so the company that supplies Fiat with their paint will know that they need to store more peppermint green than they do racing green. Yeah? Because virtually nobody wants British racing green on a Fiat 500, would they? Would look ridiculous. So that gives you some idea as to what your probabilities will be for each of the different types of paint that you will buy. If you have surplus in store, keeping your surplus costs you money. It does. It means that you don't store other stuff that you might sell and things like that. If you won't meet demand, then companies go elsewhere in future. Once you've lost a customer, it's more difficult to get the customer back than it was to win the customer in the first place. So we've got a completely hypothetical thing here. There's a given colour, and every day the number of batches that are wanted will be 1, 2 or 3. Okay? I don't know how big these batches are. They must be quite big because the cost of storing them is quite large, as we'll see in the in the thing. So any leftover at the end of a day will cost $10 to store. However, each batch sells for $1,000 and costs you $500. So you're making, potentially, every batch you can sell, you're making $500. But if you can't sell it, then you are losing $10 on that, of that 500 on that batch that day, right? So these things have got to go into your calculations. However, if somebody comes along to buy a batch of peppermint blue paint and you haven't got one in peppermint, is it peppermint blue or peppermint green? Don't know. Comes along to buy this paint and you haven't got one in store, then they go somewhere else and they don't come back to you, and so you have future losses of $1,000. So that's your problem. You've got to decide how many batches should you buy every day. What's the best number to buy? How can you work out? Well, we can do a payoff table, and this matches up our demand. So we can make decision. We've got 3 potential decisions we've decided to have. We buy 1 batch, 2 batch, or 3 batches. The cost of if the demand for batches is 1 batch and you've bought 1 batch, you make $500. Yeah? Cost you $500, you sell it for $1,000, you've made $500. If you have 1 batch and the demand is for 2 batches, you still sell your 1 batch, but then you have a future loss which needs to pay off that. And similarly for 3 batches. If you buy in 2 batches and the demand is only for 1 batch, then you've got that other batch to store, and that costs you $10, so your profit goes down to $4.90. Similarly, at 3 batches, $4.80. I think all these figures work out. I've had them checked before now, and I think they do work out. So, how do you make your decision? What is the way that you'll drive your decision? And there are basically 3 approaches to life. The pessimistic way. This is called the maxi-min way in this whole thing. What it is that you believe the worst outcome is the most likely, right? So you do that which minimizes your loss, right? That's what you aim to do. You minimize your loss. So what we want is the best worst outcome. So if you did that, in this case, we'll look back at the numbers. Best worst. So what's the worst outcome you could have? If you buy 1 batch and there's 3 batches, that's bad. Which is the best worst outcome in this one? 2 batches, demand for 1 batch, and so on. So you make your decision on that, and in this case you buy 3 batches, which has a worst outcome of $480. Yeah? Should you buy 2 batches? Why would you buy 2 batches? Yes, but is it more likely? What's the best worst outcome? $490, buying 2 batches. Yes. You're right. 2 batches, not 3 batches. The optimist has the opposite view. The optimist always assumes that the best possible outcome will happen. And so they try to maximize everything. Yeah? So what they're looking for is the best profit from all 3 things. So back to there. Let's get this right. $1,500 is definitely 3 batches this time, yeah? That's what's going to happen. If I don't have 3 batches, I won't get the $1,500 that I could get. Yeah? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Sorry? You're a pessimist. So you like the maxi-min. Yeah? The one that comes out with, at least I've got $490.
Well, yeah, exactly, because if anything bad can happen, then it will happen.
Right. If anyone, and I live with some children with that attitude. It's really hard. Anything bad will happen. It will happen. Anything bad can happen. You know, they're ready to bury themselves in their bedroom because they're scared of coronavirus. Come on, okay? It's bound to happen. So, anybody here think that the optimist has got the right idea? You do.
Because you only lose, the worst case, if you only sell 1 batch, you're only $10 worse off than
Yes.
the pessimist, but you're $500 better off.
If you sell
Yeah.
any more.
Yeah, then
Companies are painting cars all the time.
all the time.
Yes, companies are painting cars all the time, unless something goes wrong. You know. Sorry? Like Brexit, things happen. So you don't, right? So we've got another approach coming, okay? And the other approach, this one is still there, is called the realist. And the realist goes with the expected monetary value, and what this does is to take into account the probability of these events happening, right? So this person or company likes to say, well, how likely is it that we will have a demand of 2 batches? How likely is it we will have a demand of 3 batches? How likely is it we will have a demand of 1 batch? Now, if you're normally doing that over a long period of time, yeah, then you will get you'll have a better idea of what the probabilities should be. So what we do is an expected monetary value. We calculate the expected payoff for each decision, but we have probabilities of those events happening. Okay, so we don't just say, right, that one comes to 1,500. We say, well, how likely is it that we're going to sell that? So let's say we have a probability of 0.3 of only one batch being wanted, 0.6 of 2 batches, and 0.1 of 3 batches. Now that makes it less likely that you'll actually make the $1,500, but also less likely that you will only make the $490. So, for the realist then, we still have the same decision table, but when we apply the probabilities, we will have a different outcome. So, the total for buying 1 when the demand is 3 is $100. For 2, it's $797, and for 3, it's $594. Because you're most likely going to be asked for 2 batches, so make sure to have 2 batches, basically. Don't lose out on the 2 batches just by having 1 batch, because you know you'll sell the 1 batch, because you'll lose the business in the future on your 1 batch. Okay? The more material you have to work with, the more likely you are to be able to work this one out. Now let's look at my company, starting out within the next 12 months, trying to sell this thing that we've made, right? I don't want you to actually solve this problem for me, because I'm not going to give you the values, because that wouldn't be fair on you. Sorry? If you can. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, come and talk to me afterwards. No. So, I've got to decide which of 2 sets of equipment to buy. Okay, I've got 2 sets of equipment I could buy, and one is more expensive than the other, but one is more flexible than the other. Yeah? So I could sell more of one because I could have more ways of using one of them than I do of the other. One of them is, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but those are the things that I've got to do. Now, I've also got to have enough equipment in store to actually supply. So if I were to go into the market and say, okay, I can supply you with the equipment you need for your hospital, for all of your patients, how many patients have you got that you will need to supply this equipment to? Okay, I can do that, but I won't be able to do it for a while, because I've got to buy the equipment in and stuff like that. So I have to think to myself, how many of these things am I going to sell in the near future, against how much is it that I've got to have stored in equipment that I've not yet sold. Yeah? Because I have to buy those. And as we said the other day, cash flow is the most important thing. Yeah? Positive cash flow is what we need. If we have positive cash flows, we will survive. If we have negative cash flows, we will not survive. Charles Dickens had a character called Mr. Micawber. Yeah? And he had the very, very tight rein on this one. I can't remember exact figures, but income £10, 3 shillings and 6pence, expenditure £10 and 4 shillings, outcome penury, income how much was it? £10 and 5 shillings. Expenditure £10, 4 shillings and sixpence. Outcome, happiness. Yeah. You've got to have positive cash flow in order to survive as a company. So if you've only got limited amount of information, it's difficult to use the expected monetary value to get you further. It also doesn't in itself take account into the attitude of the decision maker to risk taking. So if you in the front row here were making the decisions, you might still say, yeah, but that was the probability in the past. What's going to happen next week? And you at the back, in the middle there, you'd say, yeah, but it's a bit the same, isn't it? We've got a good record. We know how many hospitals are actually doing this. It's going to get better. It's got to get better. People will start to hear about the wonderful equipment we make, and they'll want to buy our thing. So you've got different attitudes will still come into play. There are other less quantifiable factors, such as reputation. Yeah, very important, as I said at the beginning of this last few bits of stuff. Your reputation matters. If you don't supply when you need to supply, yeah, then your reputation goes down. If I wanted to buy, what sort of car do I want to buy next? A Mercedes, yeah? And I went along to the Mercedes dealer along the road there, and they said, yeah, we can supply you a nice white one with bright red seats and whatever else I might want. What do I want in my Mercedes? And we'll have it for you by the end of the week. And you go back at the end of the week and they say, sorry, there was a bit of a hold up in the red seat material. It'll be a couple of months. You're likely to say, well, and go somewhere else. Yeah? Your reputation is gone. Why you wanted a Mercedes in the first place? I don't know. Anyway, so there we go. It's a kind of linear function for money, so that every $1 has the same same increase in satisfaction for the decision maker. Yeah?
Sorry.
That's okay. And the idea is a rough estimate. It's not an absolute thing. So, that's all we're going to talk about in terms of the financial things. We're going to look further at risks, and what I'd like to move on to now is a quick bit of a discussion in the... Hello, what happened to this one? I stopped this for the minute.